Welcome to the Bookworm Duo, where we explore a variety of books. Let's get started.
Today, we are unpacking a scenario that is simultaneously the funniest and maybe the most terrifying thing I have read in a long time.
I'm with you on that.
We are diving into Not Sorry, an unapologetic look at what makes Canada worth fighting for by the Canadian comedian Mark Critch.
It's a wild ride. It's essentially a satirical survival guide for a geopolitical crisis that Critch imagines taking place, in the very near future.
Specifically around 2025 or 2026.
Right. And honestly, given the current news cycle, it feels a little less like fiction and maybe more like a premonition.
The premise is simple, but the stakes are incredibly high.
Wow.
Donald Trump has returned to the presidency.
And he looks north, sees the second largest landmass on Earth, and just decides...
That's mine. He decides America's hat needs to become America's attic.
Exactly. He wants to annex Canada and make it the 51st state.
Right. And while that sounds completely absurd, Critch uses this nightmare scenario to explore a really serious question, which is what actually makes up Canadian identity? Is it just not being American, or is there something, substantial there?
And he starts this exploration with just a brilliant concept he calls the Canadian standoff.
Okay, we have to unpack this.
The visual is incredible. We all know what a Mexican standoff is, right?
Of course. Guns drawn, tension, nobody moves or they die.
But a Canadian standoff. Critch describes future archaeologists finding two skeletons in a doorway.
And the forensic analysis shows no trauma, no violence at all.
They literally starved to death.
Because they just refuse to stop saying after you.
No, after you.
I insist after you. Please, I couldn't possibly...
They just died there. It's hilarious, but he's making a point about the national character, isn't he?
He absolutely is. He argues that Canadian identity lies somewhere in the ether between being a total doormat and committing murder.
That sets up the central conflict of the book perfectly.
Yeah.
You have this polite, deferential nation living next door to what Critch calls the final boss of America.
He describes Trump as a parasite, threatening to, and I apologize for the imagery here,
Oh, no.
crawl up Canada's bottom.
That is visceral, but it captures the fear. And Critch suggests that America isn't just using military might. They're using a very specific psychological tactic on Canada. He calls it negging.
Which is a term you usually hear from, like sleazy pickup artists.
Right, the technique where you insult someone to lower their self-esteem so they seek your approval.
And Critch points out Trump does this constantly on the trade stage. He claims he doesn't need Canadian oil or lumber or cars.
Which is just objectively false, right?
Completely false. Canada supplies millions of barrels of oil a day to the U.S. But the negging works because Canada has this deep-seated insecurity.
So Trump is basically telling Canada, you're ugly, your lumber is trash, and nobody likes you, but maybe if you become the 51st state, I'll date you.
It's toxic emotional manipulation on a geopolitical scale.
Now, usually you'd laugh this off as impossible. I mean, a G7 nation just giving up its sovereignty. No way.
But this is where the book stops being funny for a second and gets really, really interesting.
He pivots to a history lesson about his home province, Newfoundland.
And this is the part that really grounds the satire. A lot of people outside of Canada, or even younger Canadians, they just don't realize how recent this history is.
I certainly didn't. I tend to think of Canada as this, fixed map. But Newfoundland was its own thing until very recently.
Until 1949, Newfoundland was a separate dominion. It was a country. It had its own passport, its own stamps, currency, prime minister, all of it.
Wow.
But it was financially ruined. It went broke. So it essentially retired as a country and voted itself out of existence.
That is mind-blowing. Imagine the United Kingdom or France just deciding, you know what, we're done. Let's just become a state.
And the deciding factor wasn't some grand ideological shift. It was money.
Just cash.
Specifically, what they called the baby bonus, the Canadian family allowance. Critch jokes that Joey Smallwood, the politician who led the charge.
The pig farmer turned politician.
That's the one. He basically bribed the population.
So the proud, independent Newfoundlanders looked at their flag, and then they looked at a monthly government check, and they chose the check.
That's the harsh reality Critch is pointing out. He's saying, look, if Newfoundland, which is arguably the most culturally distinct part of North America, could be bought for a baby bonus, don't think for a second Canada couldn't be bought by the U.S. if the price is right.
That is a very sobering thought.
It is. But because Critch is a comedian, he doesn't let us dwell in the depression for too long.
Oh.
He swings right back to the absurd with these recurring letters from the desk of the president.
Oh, these are gold. Throughout the book, we get these letters where Trump is writing to the provincial governors, which isn't even a real title.
Nothing.
And he's wooing Canada like a reluctant lover. Or, as Critch puts it, he wants Canada to be his sugar baby.
The tone is so specific, it captures that transactional view of relationships. He doesn't want to marry Canada. He wants Canada as a side piece.
He literally offers an NDA, promises to treat Canada just like Stormy Daniels. I mean, talk about a red flag.
He tries to make Canada jealous by bringing up Greenland. He talks about creating a Greenland throuple.
It just highlights how little he actually knows about the country he's trying to conquer. The geographical confusion is a running gag.
Oh, yeah. There's that moment where he shares an AI-generated image of himself conquering Canada standing on a mountain.
But the mountain in the background is the Matterhorn.
From Switzerland.
Exactly. And he signs an executive order renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America.
Because, he claims the cartels are using the name to smuggle drugs. Just drives home this idea that Canada isn't a place with people and history. It's just real estate they haven't closed the deal on yet.
Which brings us to the one institution that is purely about history and symbolism, the monarchy. Now, I'm not a royalist, but Critch devotes a whole section to King Charles that is surprisingly affectionate.
It is. And it makes sense in this context, right? When you have a chaotic, transactional populace next door trying to buy you, Canadians instinctively look for the opposite of that. They look to the dad across the pond.
The king effectively becomes a shield.
A symbolic shield. Critch describes King Charles reading a speech from the throne. He subtly emphasizes sovereign rights and freedom without ever naming Trump. It's the ultimate British passive-aggressive pushback.
But the highlight of this section has to be Critch's personal anecdote. He actually met Charles back when he was Prince in Newfoundland.
He was his tour guide.
Yes, the Prince of Ales, they called him, because Critch took him to a brewery. But the build-up is the best part.
Right. He's waiting at the fence, terrified of messing up protocol.
And there's this local Newfoundland lady next to him who demands to meet the prince. She's holding this object.
It was a picture of Queen Elizabeth II, but not a nice framed photo. It was smoke-damaged and water-stained. It had survived a house fire.
She had saved the queen from a burning building, basically.
And she's yelling, "I wants to see the prince!"
And Critch, instead of having security remove her, actually facilitates the meeting.
It's a very Canadian moment. The protocol just breaks down because a nice lady wants to show off her fire-damaged memorabilia.
And then, in a panic to stay in the prince's good books, Critch awkwardly introduces his own wife to him. Just seemed normal.
It's that contrast between the high stakes and the low stakes that makes the book work.
It really is.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move to the family dinner. This is Critch's metaphor for Canada's internal politics.
And this is so essential for understanding why Canada is vulnerable to that negging we talked about. Canada isn't a unified bloc. It's a dysfunctional family.
The analogy is perfect. You've got Alberta, the rich kid in the cowboy hat, who is constantly threatening to move out.
And you've got Quebec, who is distinct, speaks a different language, and demands half of Alberta's stake while complaining about the service.
And Newfoundland is just at the end of the table complaining that someone unplugged their phone charger.
Exactly. But here is the crucial insight. Despite all these squabbles, despite Alberta and Quebec always threatening to leave, the moment an external threat appears, the dynamic changes completely.
It's that classic nobody hits my brother but me rule.
Precisely. When Trump threatens annexation, the provinces unite. Even the freedom convoy types and the woke urban crowd find common ground. They might hate each other, but they hate being told what to do by America even more.
This leads to the travel ban era in the book. And this isn't a legal ban, right? It's a social one.
Yeah, it's a self-imposed boycott. The new Canada. A tan is treason. Canadians stop vacationing in Florida or Arizona out of pure spite.
And Critch tells a story about having to travel to LA for work during this time. He's in the airport lounge trying to be incognito.
And he runs into another Canadian who's loudly judging everything. And this guy is drinking Canadian Club Old Fashions.
Which, if you know whiskey, is a bold choice.
It's a terrible choice. And the guy admits it. He says they taste awful, but he refuses to drink American bourbon. It's masochistic patriotism.
I will drink this swill because it's our swill.
It touches on how Canadian identity is so often defined by what we consume or refuse to consume, which segues perfectly into the chapter on CanCon.
Canadian content laws. This was a trip down memory lane. For our listeners who don't know, CanCon is a law requiring broadcasters to play a certain percentage of Canadian media.
It was designed to prevent cultural erasure. Critch compares Mr. Rogers, the gentle American icon, to Canada's Mr. Dress-Up.
Who was ironically American-born, wasn't he?
He was, Ernie Coombs. He came up with Mr. Rogers and just stayed. But the best story about CanCon is the origin of the Great White North sketch from SCTV. You know, Bob and Doug McKenzie.
Take off, eh? The most stereotypical Canadians ever.
Well, that sketch was created as an act of malicious compliance. The TV network needed 2 extra minutes of Canadian content to meet the legal quota.
And the actors, Rick Moranis and Dave Thomas, were just annoyed by this.
They thought the rule was stupid. So they said, fine, you want Canadian content? We'll sit in front of a map, drink beer, eat back bacon, and wear toques. They were mocking the regulations.
And the irony, of course, is that it became a massive international hit.
It backfired spectacularly. They tried to mock the rules and ended up creating the most enduring symbols of Canadian identity. It sort of suggests that, you know, sometimes you fake it till you make it as a nation.
Speaking of faking it, let's talk about the military. Because Trump eventually gets tired of the letters and decides to launch a literal invasion.
Operation Trojan Moose.
But before we get to the invasion, Critch gives us a history lesson on some truly ridiculous real-world wars. The Pork and Beans War.
A border dispute between lumberjacks in Maine and New Brunswick. It was mostly just them staring at each other. And the Pig War on the West Coast, which literally started because a pig ate some potatoes.
But the one that shocked me was Defense Scheme Number 1. This was a real plan from the 1920s.
Oh, yeah. Colonel Buster Brown. The plan was, well, optimistic is a generous word.
What was the plan?
If war broke out with the U.S., the Canadian strategy was to launch a surprise attack on the U.S.
With what army?
Exactly. The plan was to invade, capture Seattle and Portland, and then, and this is the key part, immediately run away and blow up the bridges behind them.
Attack and run away.
It was a stalling tactic. They hoped to cause enough confusion to hold out until the British Empire could sail across the ocean and save them. It was basically a suicide mission.
In the book, the modern invasion goes differently. We get a chapter titled A Letter Home from a U.S. soldier named Clem Boone, and this is where the satire hits its absolute peak. Why does the invasion fail?
It's not the Canadian military. It's the weather and the politeness. The Americans roll in with Musk 1 cyber tanks, fully electric tanks.
Which is a great dig at Elon Musk.
But they didn't account for the cold.
Mm-hmm.
The batteries die immediately, and the soldiers can't walk because of black ice.
The soldier writes home describing the ice as, like, invisible magic. He can't understand why the ground is slippery when it just looks like asphalt.
And then, the Canadian standoff mentality returns. A local Canadian finds this stranded, freezing invasion force. He doesn't shoot them.
He assumes they're stuck tourists.
And offers them a ride. He takes them to the hospital for their frostbite, buys them Timbits donut holes and coffee.
The soldier writes home totally confused, saying he's getting free health care for his gout and the enemy is feeding him pastry.
The invasion is stopped by kindness. You can't fight an enemy that invites you into their kitchen.
It posits that kindness is a better defense system than a missile shield. But not everyone holds the line. We have to talk about the traitors.
This section actually made me feel a little sad. Critch names names. He talks about the Canadians who sell out to the Trump regime.
He starts with the obvious one, Kevin O'Leary.
Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank. Critch calls him the Wish.com version of Donald Trump. He depicts O'Leary trying to spin the annexation as a great business synergy.
That's funny, but then he drops the bomb. Wayne Gretzky.
The great one. This feels blasphemous.
It really cuts deep. In the book's timeline, Gretzky cozies up to Trump at Mar-a-Lago. There's a hockey tournament, the four nations face off, and Gretzky refuses to wear the Team Canada jersey.
And this hurts so much more than O'Leary, because Gretzky is the secular saint of Canada. He represents excellence. When he betrays the country in the book, it signifies the loss of the national soul.
And to make it worse, when Canadians complain, Trump tweets out, "Daddy fixed it for you."
Daddy fixed it. It's so patronizing. It reduces the greatest hockey player of all time to a prop for an American president.
It just perfectly illustrates that fear that Canada's heroes will eventually be absorbed into the American machines.
But there is one citizen of the world who resists. Santa Claus.
The chapter, The Last Christmas. This is brilliant. Santa gets stopped by icy immigration and customs enforcement while crossing the border.
They detain Santa.
They treat him like an illegal immigrant. They interrogate him.
But Santa pushes back. He argues he is a man of the world. He admits he is woke because he cares about everyone equally.
And he turns the tables on the agent, doesn't he?
He does. He knows everything about the agent interrogating him. He brings up the agent's childhood wish for a He-Man toy that he never got. It just breaks the agent down.
So we've survived the invasion, we've identified the traitors, and Santa is free. How does the book end?
The epilogue takes us to Canada Day in St. John's. It's a very quiet, grounded scene compared to the rest of the book. Critch is walking around his neighborhood.
And he spots an RV with American plates.
Specifically, it has a Kamala Harris 2024 sign in the window. Now remember, in this timeline, Trump is the dictator president.
Yeah.
So Critch assumes these are the good Americans, the refugees.
The cool Democrats. He wants to bond with them. He goes full East Coast neighbor.
He does. He walks right up to the RV. He peers in the window. He sees they have main plates. So he starts referencing an old local TV host, Eddie Driscoll, thinking they'll share a laugh.
He's looking for a connection. We're the same, you and I.
But he forgets what he looks like from their perspective. He's a stranger peering into their home. The Americans aren't charmed or terrified.
They drive off in a panic.
And that interaction just sums up the entire relationship perfectly. Canada wants to be the friendly neighbor, the cousin who knows your local TV host. We want to be liked.
But to Americans, even the nice ones, we're sometimes just the weirdos looking in the window.
They're too close for comfort. Critch's point is that we are not the same. The assumption that Canadians are just unarmed Americans is fundamentally wrong. We have different memories, different references, different boundaries.
So after all the satire, the negging, and the cyber tanks, what's the verdict? Is Canada worth fighting for?
Critch's conclusion is a defiant yes. He argues that while Canada is dysfunctional, like that bickering family dinner, and while we might be polite to a fault, there is a distinct line in the sand.
We will apologize for stepping on your foot, but we won't apologize for existing.
Sorry, not sorry. As he says in the final pages, we will never become the 51st state. Our dysfunction is our dysfunction.
It's a powerful message wrapped in a lot of jokes, and it leaves me with a question to chew on. If Canada is defined by not being American, what happens if America changes into something unrecognizable? Does Canada lose its identity too, or does it become even more important?
That's the scary question, isn't it? If the final boss changes the game, does the player still exist? Critch seems to think that as long as we have Timbits and stubborn politeness, we'll be okay.
I certainly hope so. Well, that is all the time we have for this deep dive into Mark Critch's Sorry Not Sorry. It's a hilarious, terrifying, and oddly heartwarming look at the Great White North.
Definitely worth a read, especially if you want to know how to defeat a tank with a donut.
Thanks for joining us. Subscribe for more bookish adventures and hit that like button if you enjoyed the ride. Don't forget to share the knowledge, spread the word.